Should you buy the Sony 200 to 600? Now the 200 to 600 is one of Sony's most well-known lenses, especially in the wildlife community, and it's for a good reason. But that doesn't mean that this lens is for everybody, so I'm gonna go over all the things that I love about this lens and some of the things that might steer you into a little bit of a different direction. And stick around till the end because I'm gonna be going over who I think this lens is for, but also some alternative options depending on what you shoot. So let's get into it. Oh, the sun is out. So, I'm probably like a lot of you out there, I don't do wildlife photography as a full-time career. A lot of the money I've made from photography is actually from like weddings and family photos and stuff like that. So, I don't get sent any of these lenses, and I really need to think about what lens I'm gonna get. I don't have a budget for a whole lot of lenses. So take that into account. All right, so let's get into it. The stuff that I absolutely love about this lens, and it is a lot. So let's start off with the price. Now, the price can actually be a pretty big pro or con depending on, who you are, what your budgets are, what you've used previously. So this lens comes in around 2,000 Canadian now, and that's more like, I don't know, $1,500–1,600 USD. And that might be a very good price, especially, if you're used to shooting a lot of those big primes that, cost upwards of $10,000 to $15,000. But, it took me a long time before I was able to afford this lens. And, it's been about 2 years now that I've been using it. And obviously $2,000 is a very big step up from, a $70 to $300, which might cost you like $500. It's not like pocket change, right? But I have to say that for $2,000, you are getting so much out of this lens, and it is worth every single penny. But it just might be outside your budget. So you need to think about your budget, and if this doesn't fit in your budget, there are other options, and we'll talk about that later on as well. Now, on the topic of sharpness and image quality, that is what this lens is known for. Oh my gosh, it is so sharp. This is by far the sharpest lens that I've ever used, and that has the best image quality. This is absolutely not going to be a pixel peeping type of video at all, but I'm going to throw up some images here. And here's an image that I took, actually one of the very first images I took with this lens, and this is not cropped at all, so this kind of shows you how sharp it is. So this was on the Sony a7R III, which is a pretty good camera, again, pretty mid-ranged, and you can just see all the fine details of this lens. And I upgraded to this lens from the Sigma 100 to 400 Contemporary, and the sharpness differences between those two lenses are absolutely phenomenal. I mean, this is just, it is so sharp, and you will notice that right out of the box for sure, especially if you're coming from those lower end telephoto lenses. And obviously it's not gonna be as sharp as something like a 400 prime or 600 prime, 300 prime, obviously a big difference in price there, right? But again, for that price tag, it is ridiculously sharp, and you're just gonna get great images with it. You're gonna be really happy with it for sure. So again, one of the things that I really love, and one of the things that's of course most well known for. Let's talk about the zoom. So this is an internal zoom, obviously, as most of you guys know, and obviously that's great. I came from the 100 to 400, like I said, but also back on Canon, the 100 to 400 L Mark II, and those barrels extend. Obviously this barrel will not extend. So it's internal, and that's great. It's gonna keep moisture and dust out of your lens. It's also gonna be great if you have like a gimbal or a fluid head or anything, because obviously if that barrel extends when you set everything up for it to be balanced, you're gonna have to rebalance it. And it has a great throw. So basically a throw means, how fast it goes from 200 to 600. And seriously, it's so good. So 200, 600. You just flick it with your fingers. And it's funny because a lot of the photos I take, almost I'd say 80 to like 90% of photos I take are at 600. But that throw is really important because when you're tracking something like a bird in flight, it's kind of hard to find them at 600 sometimes. So you can easily just flick back to 200, track them in the sky, switch back to 600, and you're good to go. So probably why I love the range so much, not because I'm actually shooting at 200 or 300 or 400, it's actually more just to help me track fast moving animals. It's also got a good focus ring. The focus ring is kind of funny. Sometimes I think that it's up here, but it's actually down here, and that's fine though. It's really good. Again, I never have issues if I'm trying to manual focus, especially when I'm using this for video. So that's definitely just another great pro about it. And obviously this lens has optical steady shot, which is like your image stabilizer. And obviously really important to have that on these big telephoto lenses because it helps you keep your shutter speeds down, especially because this lens goes from 5.6 to 6.3. So it's going to be at 6.3 out at 600. which means especially when you're in forests or out in the morning or out at night, you're going to be wanting to lower that shutter speed a little bit, and that OSS is great. I could go down to 1 over like 500 if the animal's not moving, or even sometimes a little bit lower. So obviously when they start moving, you got to bump it up, but it's great for that if you're like going out after a perched owl at night or something, or at dusk anyways. So happy about that. Now let's talk about the weight. And just like the price, this is subjective. If you're used to using 600 primes or 400 primes, yeah, this thing's gonna be super light, especially if you used Canon or Nikon back in the day. But if you're coming from like a 70 to 300 on, a Canon Rebel, this thing's a beast. It's gonna be much, much heavier than that. And what I'd really recommend is just going into the store. The sun is back again. I'd recommend just going out to the store, picking it up, feeling the weight, and making sure that you're good with the weight. Personally, I love the weight. I think for, again, what you get out of this, it's going from 200 to 600. It's not going to be small, or if it was, it'd be way more expensive. So, I'm super happy about the weight, but, I'm making this video for everybody, and some of you I know are coming from those more inexpensive lenses, just like I did, and it's a lot more heavy for sure. And you're definitely going to get comments about how big of a lens this is, especially from, just random people walking that aren't photographers. Just keep that in mind. Now, the weight's good enough for me to just carry this thing for a couple hours. I don't really get too tired. I can put the camera right on here, and I typically just like hold it with the tripod foot, and I never find it's too heavy. So yeah, it's good to go out and try it, because the last thing you want is, a big lens that you never use because you don't want to carry it out in the field with you. And again, this is more for those kind of like beginners, not for the pros. But obviously, I've talked to a few people that just say, I never bring my lens out because it's just so heavy, and, I'd rather stick with something smaller. So just go and check it. Check the weight and make sure you're okay with it. I certainly am, and many are too, but everyone's different, right? So go check it out for yourself. So before I talk about things that might steer you into another direction, let's talk about whether or not I recommend this lens still. And the answer is yes. I love this lens so much. I don't see myself upgrading anytime soon. Like I said, I've been using it for around 2 years, and I couldn't be happier with it. It's amazing. Now, just a little note though, going out and buying a lens like this, is it gonna make you a better photographer? No. Sadly, only you can make yourself a better photographer. You got to go out, practice fieldcraft, practice your skills, get experience, go out and shoot. That's what is going to make you a better photographer. But can you become a great photographer with this lens? Absolutely. Many pros use this lens. Again, for good reason, and it's definitely elevated my game when I've also, of course, worked on other things, like my fieldcraft, like my editing, and all that good stuff. So yeah, of course I can recommend it. Now let's get into things that might steer you into another direction about this lens. And again, I don't mean to come off negative about this. I think it's important for you to just know this stuff about the lens. It's important for you to know some of the things that might steer you in other directions, and then we'll talk about some other options. So the first thing would be the minimum focus distance. Now, the minimum focus distance on this lens is 2.4 meters when you're out at 600, and it's a little shorter when you start to zoom back a little bit, like down to 300. And that is obviously not going to be super close, but at the same time, guys, this is a lens that goes from 200 to 600 that costs $2,000. You can't have everything in it, and having a lens that focuses a little further back is definitely the trade-off for having a lens that goes out to 600. And now this is one thing I had to worry about a lot, because I was coming from the Canon 100-400L Mark II, which obviously doesn't go as far, but the minimum focus distance is like 90 centimeters, so you could focus a lot closer. And that was important for me because I shoot not just birds, but I shoot a lot of reptiles and amphibians, snakes, turtles, frogs, and a lot of large-bodied insects. And those are the things that I truly love. And I love birds too, and mammals, but that's my bread and butter. It's what I love. So I think the ultimate decision that made me okay with that is the fact that I got a macro lens. And I have a dedicated macro for things that are small, and I have the 200 to 600 for things that are further away. Yeah, you got to be aware of that. I'm not saying you can't photograph smaller stuff. I'm going to throw up some images throughout me talking about this, about smaller stuff that I photographed. In fact, here is a video of an American toad that I took at the very, very minimum focus distance at 600 meters. 600 millimeters, sorry, with a 1.5 crop. So it is absolutely possible to get those smaller reptiles and amphibians, and even some large-bodied insects sometimes, But let's steer you into a possible another direction. So if you do not have a macro lens and you're more interested in shooting those smaller types of wildlife, but birds are still kind of important to you, I'd maybe consider the 100 to 400 G Master. That lens is a lot like the 100 to 400 L Mark II. Amazing piece of glass there too, and that's going to really help with that short to mid range, where this is more of like a medium range to long range. So consider that. Ooh, it's starting to rain a little bit here. So let's talk about some other options. And guys, if you don't have $2,000 to spend on a lens, don't spend it. You don't need to be spending $2,000 on a lens to go out and do wildlife photography. There's a lot of other options out there. You shouldn't have to go into debt or anything like that. And it's your money, so do whatever you want with it, I guess. But it's just not necessary. I'm just changing with the light here again. There's other options. I was in the same spot. There was a long time where I couldn't afford a lens that was $2,000, and I did only put on Canon because I didn't have a macro lens, right? That lens was kind of an all-purpose, just like the Sony 100 to 400 G Master. But I started off with a macro lens when I switched to Sony, and I used a different telephoto. And then eventually, I could, was in a better spot financially, and I could afford this lens. So there's other options, and one of those options is the Sigma 100 to 400 Contemporary. That lens is about half the price. It's about $1,000 Canadian, which is, I don't know, like what, $700, $600 USD, at least for a used copy. And, that lens is great. You can still take great photos with it. And, there's a lot of other options out there that don't cost as much money. So, if you don't have $2,000, don't worry about it. The best lens that you can possibly get is the one that you have already, or the one that you can afford, and the one that's going to get you outside shooting. Again, if you got the money, this is a fantastic piece of glass. But if you don't worry about it. Go and get something you can really afford, and do some research within your own budget. Maybe one day, this one will be a better option for you, just like it was for me. Now, there's another Sony piece of glass that just came out recently, and that is the Sony 400 to 800, and that might be pretty enticing to you. For me, it just wasn't enticing enough compared to this one because it's just too expensive, I think. I'm not saying it's like not worth the cost or anything, but for me, it was just out of the budget. It's about double the price of this lens. And I don't want to talk about it too much because I haven't used it, but for me, I find like the 100 to 400 G Master is kind of like that close to mid-range. This is kind of like a mid to long, and that's kind of like a long range. So again, herps are kind of important for me, reptiles and amphibians. I don't know if you could shoot it with that lens or not, but for me, I just found that this was a better price and still could achieve what I wanted to. But if you are, always finding that 600 isn't enough, and you wish you had extra, reach, then maybe the 400 to 800 is right for you if you can afford it. It's obviously from reviews I've seen, it's a great lens. So 600 is more than enough for me usually, though. Now, there's also all those Sigma lenses that have come out within this range. So there's like the 150 to 600, the 60 to 600, and there's even that Tamron 150 to 500. All good lenses too, all within this price range, sort of. Now, obviously the Sigma 60 to 600 is gonna give you a lot more range, and maybe if that's what you're looking for, if you want kind of an all-purpose like travel lens that, you could take landscapes with, and also, take pictures of wildlife with, maybe the 60 to 600 is better because you're not gonna get a lot out of this 200 to 600 range in terms of like landscapes. I'm not saying it's not possible again, but you're not going to get much out of it. At least I haven't yet. I'm within that range. I want internal zoom. This one has internal zoom. Obviously, the other Sigma lenses don't. That was kind of the deal breaker for me. All right, guys. So that was the Sony 200 to 600. Absolutely, I think you should buy it. And you got to think about what you shoot and see if there's better options for you. Do some research. Go check out other videos. That's just my personal thoughts and takes on the lens. And go out and shoot. Getting out and shooting is much more important than equipment. If you've already got this lens, congratulations, you've got a great lens. And if you're thinking about it and you're on the fence, yeah, I can confirm it's a great lens, guys. Absolutely worth every single penny you're gonna pay for it. So with that, happy shooting, and either good luck purchasing the lens or congratulations on getting it. And if you enjoyed this video and you like wildlife photography, click here.